am the father of an only child. My son Dave is a shy and quiet kid, and so are his friends. They are the most well behaved kids you will ever meet. They occasionally have sleepovers at each other's houses, and I enjoy hosting them at our home. Our house is a single story, two bedroom with a huge basement. Last year, due to financial trouble, I partitioned the basement into a bedroom and a small living area to rent out. It didn't take long to find a tenant. A college student named Martin moved in and lived there for about a year. Now, Martin was a strange guy. Although he never did anything wrong, he always carried a creepy presence with him. My wife disliked him being around, but money was tight and he always paid his rent on time, so I couldn't justify asking him to leave. Now, back to the present. I had secured a new, well paying job, and Martin had moved out after a year. We hadn't taken in another tenant since. One night, my son had a sleepover with his friends. After dinner and a few games, the kids went to my son's room. My wife and I, exhausted, went to bed and quickly fell asleep. I was jolted awake by the screams of my son and his friends. My wife and I ran to my son's room, but they weren't there. We could still hear their screams, which seemed to come from the basement. The door was shut, and no matter how hard I tried, it wouldn't open. I gave it a few good kicks, and it finally gave way. The kids were huddled at the foot of the stairs, crying hysterically. My wife took them to the living room while I searched the basement for any intruder. Finding nothing, I went upstairs and asked the kids what had happened. They said they were playing games where they heard a voice calling them, leading them to the basement. As they reached the makeshift bedroom, an eerie silence took over. They heard a thump and saw a dark figure in the corner. My son described it as nearly reaching the basement ceiling, with long claws and distorted feet, and its face obscured despite the lights being on. Knowing how well behaved my son and his friends were, I knew they weren't making this up. They had seen something truly terrifying. I called their parents to take them home. The next day, I went to the basement again. It was completely empty, with no way for an intruder to have gotten in or out. As I felt my hands along the walls, I discovered a wooden panel. I broke it open with an axe and found a few items that chilled me to the bone. A couple of Ouija boards, panels with pentagrams, and strange statues. These items seemed old, predating Martin's stay. I felt sick and ran out of the basement. My first thought was that Martin was behind this, but the items looked like that they had been there for a long time. Despite living there for years, I had never felt such dread. We called a priest to bless our house, and fortunately, nothing like that has happened since. My wife still believes Martin left those things behind as a sick souvenir, but I feel bad for the trauma the kids had endured that night. About 2 years ago, I went to a sleepover at my friend Tommy's house. Tommy was an old friend, and when he used to live next door, we spent most of our days together. He later moved to the other side of the city, and we hadn't met for a long time. During a school break, we asked our parents for permission to have a sleepover at Tommy's house, and they agreed. Tommy's house was a few miles off the main road in a quiet area. The houses were spaced out from each other. I could barely see the neighbor's house from Tommy's front door. The house had a small front yard and a large backyard. When I met him, I asked Tommy if he felt comfortable living in such a quiet place. He admitted that he was scared at first, but as time passed, he managed to overcome his anxiety. In fact, he said he was happy moving away from all the noise of his old neighborhood. Tommy's room was on the first floor, while his parents slept upstairs. The first floor had a kitchen, living room, Tommy's room, and a small storage room. The house also had a basement that they didn't use, as they stored extra items in the storage room. The basement door was right next to Tommy's room. At night, after dinner, we went to Tommy's room. His parents asked us to keep the noise down as Tommy's father had to wake up early for work, and we agreed. We played games on Tommy's PlayStation for a few hours. It was 2 in the morning when I got up from the bed and stood by the window facing the backyard. I must admit, it was very quiet. I didn't remember our neighborhood ever being so quiet. I could now understand why Tommy felt so comfortable living there. As I was about to play another round, I thought I heard something. I went to the window to see what it was. It was muffled, thumping noise coming from somewhere near the house, or maybe from inside. I told Tommy about the noise, and he too found it strange. We looked out of the window but couldn't find the source of the noise. Tommy slightly opened his room's door and peeked out. He looked back at me and said that the noise was coming from the basement. I peeked out too, and indeed the noise was coming from the basement. I suggested waking up his parents and checking the basement with them, but Tommy, feeling unusually brave, decided to investigate himself. He opened the basement door and made his way downstairs. The door creaked as it opened, and whatever was making that noise stopped. I urged Tommy again to wake up his father, but he didn't listen. We reached the bottom of the stairs and looked around. It wasn't a particularly large basement. We couldn't find anything that could have made that noise, but we were sure it came from the basement. We were about to leave when Tommy spotted something beneath the stairs. Just below the wooden staircase, there was a panel that had been removed, leading to an even darker room. No one knew about this room, and Tommy wanted to check it out. I did not approve and was about to pull Tommy back upstairs, but he was almost inside the small room by this point. Suddenly, I heard Tommy scream and I saw two hands coming from inside, grabbing hold of him and trying to pull him inside the small room. I barely managed to free Tommy and we both ran from the basement. Tommy's parents ran down from their rooms upon hearing his screams. Amid all the hearing and confusion, Tommy managed to tell them what had happened. His dad saw the secret room in the basement and immediately called the cops. But it was of no use. Whoever was in the room had left through another basement door that had opened in the backyard. The cops ran a quick search of the house and looked for any more hidden spaces in the basement. We were both traumatized by the incident, and my parents came to pick me up early the next day. I am still in contact with Tommy, and we remain close friends. We try to meet at least once a month, but that was the last time we ever had a sleepover. The world can be a dark place, and you encounter all kinds of creepy people who only want to harm and disturb you. The incident I am about to narrate happened during a sleepover at my dear friend Maria's house. Let me give you some background first. Maria, Francesca, and I have been long-time friends. We were young, socially active, and considered ourselves decently attractive. This was why we always craved boys' attention, perhaps a little too much. At that time, everyone had a Tinder account, and Maria had only recently opened hers. She hadn't matched with anyone interesting until then. It was a Saturday, and we were having a sleepover at Maria's house. Her room was on the first floor, adjacent to the kitchen and the stairs leading to her parents' room. After dinner, we went to her room and had a nonsensical discussion about the upcoming vacation. Then we turned on the TV and began watching a movie. We were halfway through when Francesca said she was hungry. Maria remembered her mother had brought some cookies and went out to get them. Feeling sleepy, I was hardly able to keep my eyes open. That's when we heard a thump. I got up and saw Francesca looking around in confusion. Before I could say anything, there was another thump at the window. Maria returned, puzzled by our freaked out faces. We explained what had happened, and her face turned cold. She asked if we were joking, and just then there was a third thump. She began muttering, "It has to be him, it has to be him," as she ran to her parents' room. Her father came down the stairs and ran outside, baseball bat in hand, searching around the house. He came back empty handed. Maria's mother calmed her down, and after some time, we all returned to her room. That's when Maria explained everything. She had matched with a guy named Todd on Tinder a few days ago. They exchanged numbers and started chatting on WhatsApp. At first, Todd seemed a cool and genuine guy, and Maria was happy to get attention from a seemingly nice guy. But this happiness was short lived as Todd quickly became possessive. He would bombard her with messages if she took even a little longer to reply. Maria didn't like his possessiveness and asked him to back off. Todd didn't take it well and sent her threatening messages. One message clearly mentioned that he would come to her house and make her realize what a mistake she had made. Maria didn't take his threats seriously and blocked him until he showed up at her house that night. How Todd got Maria's exact address, I don't know. She swears she never mentioned her address in their chats. I also don't know why she never mentioned Todd before this incident. Maria's parents filed a complaint with the police the next day. This incident was enough for us to delete our Tinder accounts. We never heard back from Maria on whether the police held Todd responsible. I only hope he never does that what he did that night to any other girl.